Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Mr. Mackenzie's Distance Learning. Today, we are starting our second case study with our look at Italy and Germany. We're going to begin today with the rise of fascism in Italy. Let's begin now. Oh, look, a map, just like we always start with. Isn't this fun? Okay, well, if we take a look at this map, we can see this is a map of Europe in 1815. 1815 is a very pivotal year in Europe. This is pretty much the end of Napoleonic era. Napoleon has made his last stand at the Battle of Waterloo, and he's lost to the British as well as the Prussians, and he has been finally exiled to St. Helena in the South Atlantic. Now, if we look at all of these countries, we can see the great major powers of Europe, okay? We see Great Britain, solid color. We see Spain, the Kingdom of Spain, solid color. We see the Kingdom of France, and that's a solid color too. And it's also a kingdom, so there is a monarchy there. Napoleon has been ousted, and the monarchy has been reinstated. We also see the Russian Empire under the Tsar, and we see the sick man of Europe, the Ottoman Empire. If we look in Central Europe here, we see a lot of different colors. So if we look in the area where Germany is going to be, this is obviously before German unification, a lot of different colors, a lot of different German states. So at this time, Germany is not unified. And if we look to the south, to the Italian peninsula, again, we can see a lot of different colors. So we can understand that Italy is not yet unified as well. So the next few slides, we're just going to kind of briefly go over Italian unification and how it was all brought together. Because really before this, you have all these different kind of Italian kingdoms. You have a kingdom of the two Sicilies, you have a kingdom of Sardinia, you have papal states in the middle where the Roman Catholic Church is, you have the kingdom of Lombardo and Venetia, kingdom of Tuscany, and all these people who lived in those areas didn't really see themselves as Italians yet. They would have considered themselves Sicilian or Tuscan or Venetian or Genoese. But after about 1870, when Italy becomes unified and nationalism is soaring in Italy, everyone will start believing that they are Italian. The first figure we're going to look at is Victor Emmanuel II. He is the king of Piedmont as well as Sardinia. And what he really wants to do is unite and unify all the Italian states together, all the different kingdoms on the Italian peninsula under his control. In 1852, he's going to choose Camillo di Cavour as his prime minister. And di Cavour is referred to as the brains of Italian unification. It's under his diplomacy that unification really takes off. Now, they were more in the north, okay? Kingdom of Piedmont and Sardinia under Emmanuel II is in the north. In the south, unification was also growing, and it was led by this guy here. This very fashionable Italian, Giuseppe Garibaldi. Okay, he is also a nationalist. He is looking for unification of Italy, but he doesn't really agree with Victor Emmanuel, who wants to make it a monarchy. Garibaldi wants to unite all of Italy together as a republic. So he starts this revolt in the south, and it kind of gets a lot of attention, and a lot of people flock to his banner, and they start moving north. Now, to make a long story short, Garibaldi will eventually turn over his power in the south to Victor Emmanuel. Both had a dream of a unified Italy, but just different ideas in how it should be governed. Victor Emmanuel wants a monarchy with himself as king. Garibaldi wants a republic with himself as ruler. So eventually, to see this dream come to fruition, Garibaldi is going to hand over the power from the south to Victor Emmanuel in exchange for a constitutional monarchy. So Garibaldi doesn't get his dream of a republic, but there is a constitution as well as a monarch. So they kind of both settle for a constitutional monarchy with Victor Emmanuel as the first king of a united Italy. If we look at the political cartoon here, we see the line here at the bottom, right leg in the boot at last. Okay, the boot obviously a symbol of Italy. We even see the word Italy on there. We see Garibaldi kind of on his knees. He's laid down the sword. Okay, that's significant there because Garibaldi was known as the sword of Italian unification because he was a man of action. So he's laid down his sword to help the new king of a united Italy put on the boot and wear the power at last. So from 1870 to 1923, basically from Italian unification to 1923, this is an era that was known as liberal Italy. Now this doesn't really mean liberal Italy doesn't mean like liberals, like a liberal political party that we have here in Canada. This is more of the idea of liberal or liberty in the classical sense that groups are looking to fight for people's personal liberties and freedoms and rights in society. So during this period, we see free elections. This is not universal suffrage. No women can vote at this time. Basically, only wealthy landowners in Italy can vote. Even the poor. Okay, the poor are not really represented in government, and this is obviously going to create a rift in society between the rich and the poor. And ultimately, what's going to happen is this is going to manifest itself into general strikes when the workers aren't given good a living wage or good working conditions or working hours. They are going to start collectively organizing themselves into unions. Okay, we just kind of went through this ourselves, right? With the schools, we saw general strikes when the union felt that their rights were being maybe taken away or they weren't being treated fairly. The union collectively goes on strike. And this was a growing trend in Europe, Western Europe, in the late 1800s. We really see a rise in labor unions. In Europe, it's more referred to as trade unions. We see a rise in this of the workers coming together and getting organized and collecting themselves as a group for their demands. Better working conditions, better working hours. Maybe we'll organize and say we only want to work 12 hours, not 14-hour days. Maybe we're going to only work 6 days a week instead of 7. Maybe we should have an increase of pay. All of these demands would be met. All of this is really just a big response to industrialization. Industrialization kind of changed the work pattern in Europe in the mid-1800s, basically from 1850 for the next few decades. Industrialization sweeps through Western Europe, and the rise in labor unions is kind of a direct response to this industrialization and the poor working conditions that the workers were suffering. So a lot of labor union issues was really connected to the idea of socialism. So it's during the mid-1800s to late 1800s, to basically the turn of the century, socialism is really connected to these labor unions. And we start to see these socialist parties now being represented in governments. So the wealthy elite of Italy don't care for trade unions. Okay, there's going to be another big rift in society, and that's going to be between the wealthy elite and the trade unions. Now, the wealthy elite could be the person who owns the factory or the person who owns the business. They're not going to care for these trade unions, because before trade unions were around, if a worker started complaining, I only want to work 6 days, not 7. I want to work 8 hours a day, not 12 hours a day. The factory owner could say, well, you can hit the bricks. You're going to be fired right away. But now with these trade unions that are standing up for the rights of the workers, this is going to cause a lot of tension in society between the wealthy elite, and like the factory owners, and the workers. And all this kind of was played out in Karl Marx's book. You might remember the Communist Manifesto, a very big line in that book saying the workers of the world unite. That was the whole idea, that the working class would transcend political boundaries of society, that they would bind themselves together to kind of take down the wealthy elite and the business owners and the factory owners. Now, in Italy, we also wanted to see, or they wanted to see, a separation between church and state. So we have to know our geography. We have to know where Rome is. Rome is now the capital city of a unified Italy. Within the city of Rome, we have Vatican City. Now, this is the headquarters of the Holy Catholic Church. Now, when it was made a constitutional monarchy, the sitting government does not want the church to be involved in the government, in the direction and policies of the government, which obviously is going to frustrate the Catholic Church, because now it seems like they're taking away some of their power in decisions being made for the country. So ultimately, what we want to take away from this is that there are rifts in society in Italy. There is tension brewing in Italy in many aspects. Okay, we see division in Italy. Obviously, there's a division between the north and the south of Italy. People who lived in the north of Italy, it was more of an economic base, more rich people, more industrial power up in the north. In the south of Italy was more agricultural. It was poorer. Most of the people who started immigrating out of Italy at kind of the mid-1800s to the turn of the century, that kind of moved out to start a new life in America or Canada, primarily came from the south, because that was the poor area. They were looking to find a better life in the new world, in America and Canada. So big division between the north, with kind of the economic elite, more industrial power, and the south, which was more agricultural based. Now, there's also a division between the rich and the poor. We start to see a division between trade unions and the factory owners. Obviously, the factory owners don't really like the trade unions because they're going to make it hard for them to keep production going. If they have to slow it down because, well, they could only work 8 hours a day instead of 12, or if they only worked 6 days a week instead of 7, that slows down production. We see a lot of links between trade unions and this idea of socialism that was growing, and what eventually is going to turn into the idea of communism, which eventually takes over all of Russia into the Soviet Union. And there's also a division between the church and the government, a separation between church and state. The government does not want to see the church influential in government decisions. By the late 1800s, Italy was participating in what became known as the carving up of Africa. If we look at our our map of Africa here, we can see land occupation by all pretty much the major European powers. They carved it up amongst themselves. Belgium, France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and independent. Not really sure what independent means right there. But if you look at the continent of Africa, it seemed every Western European power was carving up bits for them. This is colonialism. This is imperialism that we were talking about during World War I, kind of the lead up to World War I. And you can see that a lot of Western European powers had already staked a claim in Africa. Now, Italy, newly unified by the time of 1870, had to go in and take really what was left. Oh, I know what independent means. Okay, independent was this area of Ethiopia, the Empire of Ethiopia. It's really the last independent area of Africa left. So this is going to be a major hotspot where a crisis is going to break out. Italy is going to want that because it has not been claimed yet by a European power. So the carving up of Africa, this is, like I said, the late 19th century. This is Italy wanting to be a great power of Europe. This is just like our first case study with Japan wanting to be a great European-style power, a great Western-style power. Well, now Italy, which is now newly unified, also wants to be a great power of Europe, just like Germany was at that time. So Germany had also had unification and was going out and grabbing land for its empire. That's why in this political cartoon, we see these kind of white European men sitting around a table. They're all going to get a slice of cake here that says Africa on it. And the person about to carve up the cake is a very famous German figure. This is Bismarck, and he's about to slice up the cake for European power. So Italy wants to be a great European power like Great Britain or Germany. Now, in order to do that, it must create an empire. It's going to need imperialism. It's going to need colonies to support its growing population, to bring back resources to their country. This sounds very familiar. This is just the same kind of playbook that we just went through with Japan. As we go through this, you're going to see a lot of similarities of what Italy was doing that Japan did. And then when we get to Germany, it seems like Hitler is going to be doing the exact same thing that Mussolini was doing. So by the late 19th century, all that Italy really has is the eastern portion of what is going to be known as the Horn of Africa. They have two areas on the Horn of Africa. They have what's known as Italian Somaliland, which today is known as Somalia. They also have an area north of that called Eritrea, which today we know as Eritrea. Now, the land in between it is called Abyssinia. Today we call it Ethiopia. It's the same thing. This is the independent part. This is the last independent area in Africa, and Italy wants it. They already have Somalia. They already have Eritrea. Now they want what's in between it with Ethiopia. It's the last independent place. So in the late 19th century, Italy goes after Abyssinia. Okay, Italy goes to war with Abyssinia, and they lose. Now, this loss is fairly embarrassing because we have a newly unified, industrialized nation of Italy that goes up against a poor area of Africa, Ethiopia, not industrialized, no modern warfare, and Italy loses. So they're going to want to have revenge. They're going to want to avenge this loss. And by 1910, many Italian nationalist groups want to avenge this loss. A year later, by 1911 to 1912, nationalist groups are going to be putting a lot of pressure on the liberal government to go to war with the Ottoman Empire. Now, this seems a little kind of out of place. To get back at Abyssinia or Africa, they're going to take a war with the Ottoman Empire, which is not really in the same continent. Why are they going to do that? Okay, they're going to have a short war with Turkey. Now, what are they hoping for? Okay, so they had a war early on in Abyssinia and lost. Nationalist groups want to avenge this loss, but before going in and invading Abyssinia again, they're going to take a fight or pick a fight with the Ottoman Empire. What are they hoping for? What do you think? Pause the video, write down a couple of ideas of what you think their thoughts are here. Okay, well, let's see how you did. What are they hoping for by going to war with the Ottoman Empire? Well, we know that nickname of the Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe, so there may be an easy target. And if Italy wins, obviously they can get more land and territory, grow their imperialistic might. Maybe they can get some land or colonies that the Ottoman Empire had in Africa, which is exactly what they do. So ultimately, Italy will win in a very short war with Turkey. And Italy will get from this Libya in North Africa. You can see this is I think this map here is a different language, but I think you get the idea. You can kind of figure out where Libya is up there in the north, in North Africa. So now, if we look at this map, you can kind of see right over in the Horn of Africa, over by Italian Somaliland. We see Eritrea, Abyssinia in between it. Italy also has Libya in North Africa, which some of the spoils of war from going against the Ottoman Empire. They've taken that from the Ottoman Empire now. So now this brings us to World War I and Italy's involvement in World War I. We know from the map here that they were allied in the Triple Alliance with Austria-Hungary and Germany. By 1882, they had allied themselves with the Triple Alliance with Austria-Hungary and Germany. But as was discussed in our World War I talks, Italy is not bound by the treaty to join war when war erupts in 1914. This alliance was a defensive alliance, so Italy felt if Austria-Hungary or Germany was invaded, they would come to their defense because they'd been attacked. But Italy perceived Austria-Hungary and Germany as the aggressors and felt it was not bound by their alliance to join. This political cartoon here shows Germany, Austria-Hungary, and then obviously the smaller, weaker of the three, Italy. And Italy kind of wanting to be a member there and be as powerful as the other two nations. So interventionist groups are going to try to persuade the Italian government to join the war. But now there's this debate within Italian government of what side should they join. Should they continue to go in with the alliance with Austria-Hungary and Germany, or should they join the Entente powers? Nationalist groups are pushing for Italy to join the Entente. Why? What are they really hoping for with this? Much the same way that when Japan joins World War I, they kind of look at both sides and they look at what's known as the tell of the tape. Who on paper looks like they're going to win this thing? Italy's going to do the same thing. And they're going to figure that the Entente have a better chance in this war. And if they win, maybe Italy can get more land, grow their political boundaries, get more land, get more resources for their growing population. Maybe they can get areas controlled by Austria-Hungary, areas where Italian people are living within the borders of Austria-Hungary. We can reunite them to a growing Italian nation. So that's really what they're hoping for. So that's where they're going to go with. They're going to come into this war on the Entente side. In 1915, Italy will sign the Treaty of London and join the Entente. Now, what are they promised? They're promised a few things. They're going to be promised more land, more areas to the north of Italy, some areas of Austria-Hungary where those Italian people were living, as well as places along the Adriatic. Now, the Socialist Party in Italy really wanted to stay out of the war. They felt that the Great War was an imperial war, a capitalistic war, that countries were out for their own economic gain, that they can get more land, more power, more wealth. So the Socialist Party really wanted to stay out of this capitalistic war. This brings us to probably our most important figure for this case study, Benito Mussolini. We're going to be talking about him in great length over the next few lectures. Now, he's a member of the Socialist Party. The in brackets here, the Parti Socialista Italiano, something to that effect, I think. Now, he's also a publisher of a socialist newspaper in Italy. Now, even though Mussolini is a member of the Socialist Party of Italy, he really believes that war is a necessity. He's in favor of Italy going to war. So he's really going to be at odds with his own political party, the Socialists. He thinks that in order for Italy to be a greater European power, it has to go to war. For Europe to be a major player in Europe, it has to go to war. It is a necessity because for the spoils of war could make Germany very powerful. It could bring them more colonies and more economic wealth. So obviously, since he's at odds with his political party that he's a member of right now, he's going to be ousted from this political party. He's going to be ousted from the Socialist Party of Italy for these views. But he says, whatever, I'm going to go start my own party, which basically is exactly what he does. So he leaves the Socialist Party of Italy and he's going to start his own political party. Now, World War I goes very poorly for Italy. They're on the winning side of this war, but it is a disaster for Italy politically and demographically. 600,000 people are killed as a result of World War I in Italy. And since this is a total war, it affects every aspect of Italian society. We see obviously many soldiers dying on the battlefield, but this is also hurting the home front as well. Workers are abused. Their pay is decreased. So this is just going to create more division within Italy. So ultimately what we want to see since unification through liberal Italy and into World War I and its aftermath is that there was many different divisions within Italy. Even though it was united, there was many divisions, many different political groups at odds with each other. And even though they had won, they were on the winning side of World War I, it's still a devastation to Italy. So, Italy forms the first fascist political party. Fascism is born in Italy. They're the first ones to have a fascist political party, and they're the first ones to have a fascist political leader in Mussolini. But what is fascism? What do they support? Okay, we hear fascism a lot, but do we know really what it means? What I'd like you to do is pause the video and come up with your own definition of what fascism is. What do you think it is? And we'll see how far off or how close you were. What do fascists support? Pause the video and just write down what you think. Okay, so what is fascism? What do they support? Here we have the logo for the fascist party in Italy. The fascism is an Italian word. It goes back to an old Roman weapon, a fasci, which we see right there. We see kind of a bundle of sticks bound together with a blade attached to it. And the idea is that we are stronger bound together than just one stick with the blade. You're much more powerful with a bundle of sticks bound together with that blade than just that one simple stick with a blade. So, what do they support? Well, They are going to support a strong nationalism, right? They're a very strong supporter of nationalism. The nation state should be seen as a unifying force of the people. Nation state needs to be seen as superior to other nations. They also want to see foreign influence driven out. And in many cases, we're going to see foreigners being persecuted. We want to see a strong central leader in a dictator. We're going to get that with Mussolini. That dictator can rule as a totalitarian, total control of society, where it's a one-party state. Now here, like the idea of the one-party state sounds pretty good. They had just gone through an era where there was a lot of rifts in government, different groups at odds with each other. So we had socialists, we had communists, we had nationalists, and they're all at odds with each other. A one-party state would really eliminate all of that kind of squabbling within the government. Now, why might this be beneficial for Italy? Why would a fascist state be more beneficial for Italy? Pause the video, give me a couple of ideas of how fascism can benefit Italy. So why might fascism benefit Italy? Well, we know that fascism likes a one-party state, and having that one-party state would prevent all that political animosity and division that had plagued Italy for the last few decades. Under fascist control, the citizens are subservient to the state. The idea that the state now is more important than the citizen. Fascism supports military and war. The belief that war can make the state strong. Is that Frank? Frank! Oh no, wait, that's Steve. I thought that was funny, guys. I've been in this house way too long now. So, World War I has ended, and it's time to sign the treaties. The Treaty of Saint-Germain is the end of the war with Austria. The Treaty of Versailles was ending the war with Germany. The Treaty of Trianon was the ending of the war in Hungary. Italy had a lot at stake with Austria. They had Italians living in Austrian-controlled borders. So they had more at stake with the Treaty of Germain. And even though Italy was on the winning side of World War I, they are not happy. They suffered harshly during World War I, and even though they were on the winning side, there's no real payoff. Vittorio Orlando, who was, I guess, one of the big four there, he was in that picture we always see of the Treaty of Versailles. Vittorio Orlando resigns. Okay, there's no real payoff. Even though they win, it doesn't seem like a big victory for Italy, so he resigns. Now we see fascism growing more in Italy after World War I. Fascism will be anti-communism. Fascism will be anti-internationalism, which is really kind of that spirit of the 1920s. Remember we talked about the spirit of internationalism? The fascists in Italy will be against this idea of internationalism and be more for a strong nationalism. So Mussolini's popularity is growing within Italy, mainly because a lot of Italians are upset, and they're upset with the result of World War I. Italy was hoping to get some port cities. They never got it. Italians are very frustrated that they suffered so much during the war, but with no real payoff. So basically, we see Mussolini's popularity growing because there's a lot of unrest and anger within Italy. Now, in the 1920s, we also see the Red Scare sweeping through Europe and even into North America. The Red Scare is the fear of communism sweeping through Europe into America. The Red Scare was happening as well. We see that there's a Bolshevik revolution that changes Russia into the Soviet Union. European nations are worried about a communist revolution happening in their own country. Now, we know that fascists are very anti-communists. So many conservatives in Italy will show support now for the fascist political group. So conservatives within Italy will start to show more support for fascism because they have this big anti-communist sentiment. Even the church will support fascists. Why? What's in it for the church if they start to side with the fascist political group in Italy? Pause the video and write down what you think. Why would the Catholic Church support a fascist government? Let's see some ideas. Okay, so why would the Catholic Church support fascism? Well, if they align themselves with the fascist political group and the fascist political group eventually has control of the government and it becomes a one-party system, the Catholic Church then would have more of a say in the government than before. So they would become more influential in domestic and foreign policy of Italy. In October of 1922, seeing the weakness of the Italian government, Benito Mussolini will now organize tens of thousands of his quote-unquote black shirts, basically because they all wore black shirts, a paramilitary thugs. 40,000 black shirts would march to Rome and take over the government. I thought we decided black shirts and sashes, not medals. Thanks, guys. So now Mussolini and his paramilitary thugs, known as the Black Shirts, have marched on Rome in basically a coup to take over the government. Now remember, Italy is a constitutional monarchy. So what do we still have in Italy? We still have a king. Now remember at the very beginning when we talked about unification of Italy, we had Victor Emmanuel II, the guy who was in the right boot at last. Well, we now have his son as king, Victor Emmanuel III. And he's kind of seeing this unfold. He sees that Mussolini and his black shirts have marched on Rome, on the capital, in what's going to be deemed a military, more or less, takeover of the government. Victor Emmanuel III will side with Mussolini. He'll be on his side. Why? What's it? Why does Victor Emmanuel do this and not try and crush this uprising? Well, basically, Victor Emmanuel kind of sees the writing on the wall and knows that he's better to be on Mussolini's side than be against him. If his takeover of the capital is successful, Victor Emmanuel can be taken off the throne. But if he sides with Mussolini, he can kind of save his kingship and he can remain as king of Italy. So he's going to side with Mussolini, and in fact, he's going to appoint Mussolini prime minister of Italy. Did anyone see me catch that a butterfly?